Deep in the heart of an expansive African kingdom, where the sun painted the savanna in hues of gold and the winds carried tales of old, there stood a kingdom ruled by King Malak. His palace, a towering edifice of marble and gold, gleamed under the African sky, a stark contrast to the mud huts and thatched roofs of the villagers who lived in its shadow. King Malak was a man of immense wealth and power, but his rule was marked by greed and tyranny. He cared little for the plight of his subjects, demanding exorbitant taxes and imposing harsh labor requirements upon them. Each harvest season, the villagers watched helplessly as their hard-earned crops were carted away to feed the opulent banquets of the royal court, while their own families struggled to scrape by. Among the villagers, there was Mbeki, an elder known for his wisdom and compassion. Despite his age, Mbeki stood tall as a beacon of hope and resilience for his people. He gathered them beneath the ancient baobab tree, where they would share their grievances and seek solace in each other's company. "It cannot continue like this," Mbeki proclaimed one evening, his voice tinged with sorrow. "King Malak grows richer while we grow poorer. We must find a way to end his tyranny." The villagers murmured in agreement, their faces etched with determination mixed with fear. They knew the consequences of opposing the king could be dire, yet the burden of injustice weighed heavily upon them. As the years passed, King Malak's grip on the kingdom tightened. He built extravagant palaces and adorned himself with jewels, while the villagers struggled to feed their families. Those who dared to speak out against him were met with swift and severe punishment. The palace guards, loyal to the king's coin, enforced his will without question. Among the villagers, there was Kofi, a spirited young man whose heart burned with defiance. He had witnessed firsthand the suffering of his people, his own family included. Determined to challenge the king's tyranny, Kofi sought allies among the village youths, known for their agility and quick wit. "We cannot live like this," Kofi declared one evening, addressing a group of young boys gathered by the riverbank. "King Malak takes everything from us, leaving us with nothing but crumbs. We must show him that we will not be his slaves forever." The boys nodded solemnly, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. They knew the risks of defying the king, but they also knew that their future depended on breaking free from his oppressive rule. One fateful night, when the moon hung low in the sky and the stars seemed to whisper secrets of rebellion, Kofi and his band of young villagers devised a daring plan. They knew that King Malak's palace guards often grew complacent during the late hours, lulled into a false sense of security by the opulence that surrounded them. Under the cover of darkness, Kofi and his comrades crept through the dense jungle that surrounded the palace grounds. They moved like shadows, their footsteps silent upon the soft earth. The night air crackled with anticipation as they approached the imposing gates of the palace. Inside the palace, King Malak reclined upon his throne, surrounded by his courtiers and bathed in the glow of flickering torches. His laughter echoed through the halls, a stark contrast to the somber mood that gripped the villagers beyond the palace walls. Unbeknownst to the king, his guards had succumbed to the temptations of wine and revelry, their senses dulled by excess. This was the moment Kofi and his band had been waiting for. With swift and practiced movements, Kofi and his comrades slipped through the palace gates and into the heart of the king's domain. They moved with purpose, guided by the flickering torchlight that cast long shadows upon the marble floors. As they approached the throne room, where King Malak sat in all his arrogance, Kofi signaled for his comrades to wait in the shadows. He alone would confront the king, daring to challenge the tyrant who had oppressed their people for far too long. With a heart pounding with both fear and determination, Kofi approached King Malak, who lounged upon his throne with an air of superiority. The courtiers and guards around him were oblivious to the impending danger, their minds clouded by the revelry that filled the palace. "King Malak," Kofi's voice rang out clear and steady, causing a momentary hush to fall over the chamber. The king's eyes narrowed as he regarded the bold young man who dared to address him so directly. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" King Malak demanded, his voice dripping with disdain. "Who are you to disturb my peace?" Kofi stood tall, unflinching in the face of the king's wrath. "I am Kofi, a son of this land. and I speak on behalf of the villagers who suffer under your tyranny." The courtiers murmured amongst themselves, their curiosity piqued by the audacity of the young man who dared to challenge their sovereign. King Malik's gaze hardened, his grip tightening on the golden scepter that lay across his lap. "You dare accuse me of tyranny?" King Malik scoffed, his voice rising with indignation. "I am the rightful ruler of this kingdom, and it is my divine right to govern as I see fit." "But at what cost?" Kofi retorted, his voice steady despite the rising tension in the chamber. "While you feast in luxury, our people starve. While you adorn yourself with jewels, our children go without shoes. This cannot continue." Enraged by Kofi's boldness, King Malik signaled for his guards to seize the young man and his comrades. But to his surprise and dismay, the guards were nowhere to be found. They had abandoned their posts in favor of the revelry that filled the palace, leaving the king vulnerable to the villagers' righteous anger. "You think you can defy me?" King Malik roared, rising from his throne with a menacing glint in his eye. "You will regret this insolence, boy. Guards, seize them." But Kofi and his comrades were prepared. With practiced agility, they sprang into action, surrounding King Malik before he could react. In a swift and daring move, they seized the king and bound his hands with ropes woven from the fibers of the baobab tree. The courtiers gasped in shock as King Malik struggled against his captors, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. The villagers who had gathered outside the palace gates cheered at the sight of their oppressor brought low. "You will pay for this," King Malik bellowed, his voice echoing through the palace halls. "Release me at once, or you will face the consequences." But Kofi and his comrades stood firm, their resolve unshaken by the king's threats. They knew that their actions carried great risk, but they also knew that they could no longer tolerate King Malik's tyranny. With King Malik securely bound, Kofi and his comrades led him away from the palace and into the heart of the village. The villagers, emboldened by the sight of their oppressor brought low, gathered around to witness the downfall of the tyrant who had ruled over them with an iron fist. As they marched through the dusty streets, the villagers' anger simmered beneath the surface, tempered by a sense of justice long denied. They knew that their actions would have consequences, but they were willing to pay the price for freedom. Word of King Malik's capture spread like wildfire across the kingdom, reaching even the ears of neighboring rulers who had long resented his tyranny. They saw an opportunity to rid themselves of a common oppressor and joined forces with Mbeki and the villagers to ensure that justice was served. Meanwhile, King Malik languished in captivity, his once proud demeanor reduced to that of a desperate and humbled man. He raged and cursed his captors, promising vengeance upon all who had dared to defy him. But his threats fell on deaf ears, for the villagers had grown tired of his empty promises and broken dreams. Under the shade of the baobab tree, Mbeki and the coalition of villagers and neighboring rulers convened a trial to determine King Malik's fate. The king was given the opportunity to defend himself against the charges of tyranny and oppression that had been levied against him. But try as he might, King Malik could offer no justification for his actions. His greed and lust for power had blinded him to the suffering of his people, and now he faced the consequences of his actions. "It is true," King Malik admitted finally, his voice heavy with regret. "I have taken more than my fair share, and for that, I am truly sorry." His words were met with skepticism from the villagers, who had endured years of hardship under his rule. They demanded restitution for the years of suffering they had endured and assurances that such injustices would never be repeated. Moved by their pleas, King Malik pledged to make amends. He agreed to relinquish his wealth and redistribute it among the villagers, ensuring that each family received their fair share. He also promised to enact reforms that would protect the rights of the villagers and prevent future abuses of power. In the months and years that followed, King Malik remained true to his word. He worked tirelessly alongside Mbeki and the villagers to rebuild their community and heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon it. Schools were built, providing education for the children who had once been denied the opportunity to learn. Healthcare clinics were established, offering medical care to those who had suffered from neglect under the old regime. As the kingdom flourished under the leadership of King Malik and Mbeki, word of their achievements spread far and wide. They became symbols of justice and redemption, inspiring neighboring rulers to govern with compassion and fairness. And so, the tale of the greedy king and the liberation of the poor villagers became a legend whispered among the winds of the savannah. It spoke of courage and defiance in the face of oppression, of unity and solidarity among those who dared to dream of a better future. As the sun set over the kingdom, casting a warm glow across the rolling hills and shimmering rivers, Mbeki gathered the villagers beneath the baobab tree once more. They shared stories of their struggles and triumphs, knowing that their journey was far from over, but filled with hope for a brighter tomorrow.